Just make it easy. Seriously, the easier you can make it for people to figure out the pricing on your product, the easier it is for them to buy. Simple.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
It's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the challenging relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving. Today our guest is Duane Dufault, and here are 3 things you want to know about Duane before we start. He is currently a fractional CRO, and I think he just changed his title because he was a fractional VP of Sales. We'll talk about that. And he has finished Ironman races and is a dad of 4 daughters, so you may as well call him Superman. Welcome, Duane.
Great intro. Yeah, it's interesting. The fractional role always gets an eyebrow raise and interesting questions, that's for sure. But the dad of 4 daughters, that one's stories for days.
Oh my gosh. So I always start with, how did you get into pricing? But you aren't in pricing. So how did you get interested in pricing? What's pricing have to do with your role?
Oddly enough, pricing is, for sales and revenue, it's directly tied, but most people don't think to ask the sales leaders or sales reps in an organization about how they feel about pricing. You usually just hand it to them and say, good luck. And so for me, one of the growth levers that I always look at is like, how is pricing structured for whatever product it is? Because that's a really big indicator on how people are going to buy from your company. If you've got hard to understand pricing, if you've got crazy, like there's been some companies that have pricing that you literally have to get on the phone with somebody to have them explain it to you. And even by the end of the call, you're like, I still don't know what I'm going to be charged. That's a problem. And that's friction in the buying process that you need to remove. And so there's a big part in sales and growth that has to do with pricing that a lot of people really don't see that connecting, unfortunately. So I got in it, I brought a focus to it by way of force because no one was really paying attention to it at some of the organizations I've worked with.
Yeah, so I think there's about 100 follow-up questions in what you just said.
Yeah.
But what I do want to come back to is, what was the spark where you said, hey, I think sales really needs to focus on pricing?
2 things. One, it came about when the SMB was where I kind of got my start in SaaS. And pricing before that was always interesting because everyone always seemed to sell on discounts. That was the only value that they can bring. They're like, oh, let's go price high, and then we can give a discount up to 50%, whatever, and people buy the product online, right? The old school drop ship mentality where you run a Facebook ad where you have the pricing and you slash the pricing. That was the way a lot of people looked at pricing. But in SaaS, you can't really afford to discount heavily because of the long trail revenue that you get from it. And so in the SMB world, when we had a good problem where there wasn't any friction in the buying process because the product was like $3 per user. But as we started adding more and more functionality, there was a lot of people just automatically opting into the extra features because it didn't cost anymore. And so what we did is we just ran an experiment. We ran an experiment of these 10% of new trialers are going to get shown X price, and the rest of them are going to get shown the old pricing. And there was literally no hiccup in conversion, none. So I was like, oh, okay, let's see what else we can do. Let's just change all the pricing to $5 a user and see what happens. Nothing. I think conversion dropped by like 0.1%. It was like, okay, there's a huge lever here. When you're onboarding 100 customers in the SMB world and you jump the price from $3 to $5, your growth looks crazy in that month when you're looking over the different metrics. And so we let that sit for a little bit, and then we came back to the drawing table 3 months later and said, where's our users? Like what are they doing inside of the app, and can we charge extra for it? And so then we're like, all right, let's create a different tier. Okay, so we have the $5 for the basic service set of features, and then these things provide more value to our larger customers. Let's just feature gate it, and charge these ones $7. No hiccup in conversion until we started getting to a certain point. So we would run pricing tests all the time to see what would happen to conversions, what would happen to leads that were coming in, things of that nature. And so that became a fascination for me of, when should we start looking at pricing? What are the indicators that say we're priced ourselves out of the market? What are the indicators that say we need to charge more? Those types of things. And so every 6 months or so, whether it's a client of mine or a company I'm at, I'm going to look at pricing. I'm going to look at what's been the conversion metrics over the last 6 months to make sure that we're still relevant in the market amongst competitors. And then two, we're charging enough money to where people take it seriously, but don't undercut ourselves, if that kind of answers your question.
Yeah. And I'll say that I agree with every single thing you just said. I thought that was a fantastic story.
Mm.
But B, it sounded to me like you were describing product management, not sales.
Yep. And so I used to not know the difference between product and engineering. It was just a world I wasn't involved in until I met like a true product manager, someone that talked to customers, took their feedback and did testing. And that's, and then him and I talked about the work that we were doing with pricing. And he was like, where's all this data? And so I showed him all the data in the CRM, and because I had everything built in the CRM, because product to that company was engineering. And when this person came on board, we showed him all of the metrics, all of the usage data and all that stuff. And he just ate it up. And so I realized that product marketing and a good sales process are like two sides of the same coin. It's like sales and marketing, but like a good sales process and product marketing is so closely tied because the questions that a good product marketer asks are a lot of the same ones you get from a sales conversation, a discovery process, and they take them down the same path. And so product marketing is fascinating from my perspective because like you need to have a certain perspective on customer engagement and usage to understand how to shape and evolve both the product, the customer journey, and what they pay for the product.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And I usually think of product marketing, we'll say, and sales in the following way. We have marketing companies to do programs that are targeted at many, many different customers at the same time. And we have salespeople to focus on one customer at a time. And that's the big difference between the two.
Yeah. So in my experience with that, when you got to have the consistency throughout the entire buyer's journey. When you have a marketing team that has a certain perspective, and then a sales team, and then a product team, you don't have any consistency and feedback in the journey. You don't have a consistent flow of data. And so if you have a marketing team that's doing mass general messaging, but then you have a sales team that's highly focused on specific verticals, one, I can just feel the low lead count. And two, I can feel the frustration from the sales rep because I've seen a lot of corporate type companies have this, where sales reps aren't fully educated on other verticals to be able to do a proper discovery. I like it the other way around. I like to have niche, very specifically targeted marketing messaging that comes from the product team. So the product team figures out how people are using it. What are the roadblocks that they're happening? What are the success? What success are people having early in the app based on their vertical? And they give that to marketing, and marketing creates messaging around that, 3 to 4 specific verticals. But then the sales team, they're like deep generalists. They understand the nuances between the verticals. They know how to cross-reference and do a cross-discovery process in that, so they can help close and really usher in the best type of customer. The best type of customer understands something new about their problem and how your product's going to fix it. And you can't do that if you're just linear focused sales process, if that makes sense. Like you can't pull from other backgrounds to help people solve problems, because not every business is the same. They may be in a vertical, but a business may operate completely different. And if you've got a sales rep that's very, very focused and narrow-minded on one specific area, they can't pull from other experiences. And so I like it. I like to see the inverse of what you were saying.
Yeah, believe it or not, we were actually saying the same thing. I think that you slightly misunderstood what I was saying, which is
okay.
Sorry. no worries. Because what I just heard you say, I dearly loved, and that is, I want my salespeople to be talking to multiple different market segments because it gets them more broad.
Okay.
It's easier for them to understand problems when they go find them, or recognize that there are major problems in some companies that they may not have seen before.
Gotcha.
So I
Okay,
think that's brilliant. But I would say the following. Every time marketing does something, whether it's a program or not, they're targeting many customers. It could be in a single market segment, but it's many customers.
Gotcha. Okay.
Every time sales does something, they're talking to a single customer.
Gotcha. Yep. That makes more sense and add some clarity around what you said.
Yeah.
You just reiterated the same thing and hey, there you go.
Right. But it was brilliant. It was brilliant. Hey, so one of the things that I always struggle with, and I just want to hear your thoughts, is salespeople tend to underprice if we give them pricing authority. What do you do about that?
That's tough because all I want to say is teach your reps how to unpack value, not add value, if to unpack value. Because anywhere you go, you can ask for a discount and most likely get it. The whole adage of let me go ask my manager is fake. Every salesperson has a floor they can go to no matter what company you're at. Some companies will authorize up to 75%, depending because they understand the metrics on the back end. But that's not good for the reputation of the company because then you get referrals and people are known, the companies get known for discounts. So from my perspective, if you give reps pricing flexibility, it's great. That is the goal is to empower them to know that they can if they really need to. But on the other end of that,
pause for just a second. Right?
Yeah.
So there's huge advantages to giving reps authority, right? It speeds up the deal flow. So that theoretically the rep is closer to the customer and better knows what the willingness to pay is.
Yeah.
So they can capture that willingness to pay. I mean, there's great advantages to doing this.
So when you say pricing flexibility, what do you mean?
Well, let's just say I'm going to give a salesperson the ability or the authority to discount to 20%.
Okay. Gotcha.
Without going inside.
Okay. And that's fine. I think what that does is it gives salespeople confidence going into a sale, as long as their like value prop isn't pricing, because then what I've seen that cause is when the sales rep leads with pricing as the value, then every interaction with that specific customer starts to be about pricing. Every renewal, whether it's quarterly, biannually, annually, whatever the conversation, every conversation tends to be around what they're paying for the product rather than what problem the product is solving for. And so I do like giving sales reps the flexibility on pricing, but it's up to the sales leader to teach them how to not use it if they don't have to. Is that can I answer your question?
It does. I just don't see it happen very often. I think in companies where you give salespeople some level of discount authority, whatever it is, so let's stick with 20%.
Yeah.
You end up with a whole lot of 20% discounts.
Oh yeah. It's because it's scalable. You can scale a sales team training and scale a value prop when you hand them something like that. The part that is ultimately effective to not have to worry about discounts is not, it doesn't fit the normal definition of scaling, where you have to spend time with the customer to understand their specific needs, build their benefits for why the product's going to solve. And so once the benefit for your solution outweighs the pricing, you don't have to worry about it. Like when you do a really good discovery process with a prospect and help them get clarity around their problem and then connect those problems to your solution, then pricing isn't part of the conversation. But when most of the time, when you give reps the pricing flexibility, that's their knee-jerk reaction to saying, oh, we can give you X%. And then they lead with that. And then it just becomes a problem throughout the whole cycle, the customer journey and all that stuff. Yes, I do believe that it should be there so reps don't have to delay the buying process to undercut a competitor if they need to, but it's really up to the sales leader who's teaching them how to get better in their role to teach them how to not use it if they don't need to.
I got to say, I love a lot of what you're saying. Okay. I love everything that you're saying, but there's some things that truly resonate with me. And you used a sentence a few seconds ago or a few minutes ago that I thought was a fabulous sentence. And it implies that you've had different experiences. And so the sentence you said that I loved was, salespeople need to unpack value, not create value. And so unpack that for me, because
help me understand. that because oh my gosh, so many times I see marketing campaigns talk about features as if buyers care about them. It's the old cliche thing: if people don't want a shovel, they want a hole, but they don't know they want a hole until you help them understand what the hole's for, right? Because in reality, they want shade from the tree that's going to go in the hole. And so you can't tell them they need shade until you help them understand what the shade is for. And so you have to get them to verbalize their problem, make it real and known, because if they don't, then it doesn't exist. They're not going to remember it. But if you come into your discovery process with a deck that just has a whole bunch of bullets of stuff that came from the marketing page, that's not a value to them. They only find it valuable when they find it valuable. And it's only valuable when it solves a problem. And you can't solve a problem until you ask them what those problems are. And so you unpack value by helping them, one, get clarity around their problems, and then two, connect your solution to that problem. And then they see the value. You can't just walk up and say, hey, you like this, because that's what most sales processes do. They just show up to a conversation and they just shove a bunch of information in front of a prospect and say, cool, buy now. And it's like, people wonder why entry-level SDRs have a problem creating opportunities, because they still use BANT, or they don't train their people how to be genuinely interested in the prospect to help them understand the problem in that whole process. And so the biggest difference there, like I said, is you care about their problem and you help them see that and then connect it to your solution. And the other side of it of adding value is you assume what they find valuable. And so big differences there from my perspective.
Yes, and so we often I like to use the word show up and throw up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, very much.
And in fact, by the way, I was a salesperson really early in my career, and I sucked so badly. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But one of the things I can remember doing as clear as day is describing my product, looking into your eyes, hoping you smile or say, oh my gosh, that's important. And it's just like, it never is.
Yeah. It's because there's so many assumptions being made in the traditional sales process where it doesn't even, the issue that happens is, let's say one of your value props, quotes, value props, actually is valuable to the customer. But since they didn't tell you, you assumed they had a problem. Now there's like an anger wall of like, I've been accused of having some problem, even though you may be right. It's like a marriage, right? You can't tell your wife that, there's an issue. She has to be the one to tell you. It's the same thing. And so there's a subconscious trigger when you're right about an assumption, unless the person you're selling to is super self-aware. But it doesn't matter if it's right. It's the fact that you came in and told them that what their value is. And you have to get them to talk about it. It's the only way for them to make the connection on their own, which is where the cliche term comes from of they don't buy, they sell themselves or whatever, right? They have to get themselves to that end.
Yeah, they don't want to be sold, they want to buy.
Yes, that's the one.
Right.
Gosh.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, so a lot of what we've talked about in terms of helping our salespeople understand how to find value at the customer, or help the customer understand the value. Mm-hmm. This is everything that I would call a will I decision. Yeah. So we're talking about the inherent value of the product. Am I going to buy a product in your category? Am I going to buy a shovel? Using the example that you used earlier. Mm-hmm. But what it doesn't talk about is, why is my shovel better than my competitor's shovel? Mm-hmm. Where does that come into the sales process from your perspective?
Discovery, because you have to figure out what that specific buyer's needs are. So shovels are a great example because I own a ton of them, because one has a cool handle so I don't, my kids don't need to wear gloves when they use it. I have a wooden one where I wear gloves, but then there are ones with special points on them. There's ones with little not hoofs, but shoe things. So that way you don't. And so all shovels will get you to the same endpoint. Most types of software are 90% similar. You want a CRM? Great. There's 100 of them out there, and most of them do 80 to 90% of the same thing. but it's the difference in those details that really make the difference. And so if you have a good discovery process that's focused on the needs of the buyer, you're going to help them figure out what those differences are, because people will buy on an emotional trigger because something is exciting. And then churn or cancellation happens when they find those little things that don't meet up with what they really want to do. And so in the sales process and marketing is there to take feedback from product, to then communicate what everyone gets from it. So that way, when the prospect gets to the salesperson, it's the salesperson's job to unpack those little things, because those little things are going to be the reason why they don't cancel in a year. And so use the reference of the shovel. There's shovels I don't use. They're shaped the same, cost the same, but there's just a little bit of difference between a couple of them that really make an impact for when I'm digging that hole. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, it does. And so one of the things I like to say when I'm talking to salespeople or companies about this is, if you go through the act of determining how much value there is to owning a shovel, right?
Yeah.
You really want the shade. And I help you as a client get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
I've actually built a huge competitive advantage.
Yeah.
Because I've built this rapport and trust with my client.
Mm-hmm.
So now if there's not a huge difference between my product and a competitor's product, I at least have the advantage now.
Oh, of course. There was a company that I was with for 3.5 years, helped them go from 2 million to 11 million in ARR in 3.5 years with bootstrap. And then they were part of a giant merger in October of 21. And they were part of a marketplace that was saturated. There was a ton of them. And one of the biggest pieces of feedback we got in testimonials, reviews, whatever you call it, was the human element. They loved our teams. We would have people leave because some marketing campaign described a competitor in such a way that was so compelling. And they're like, oh, that's what we need. And then they go there and they're like, oh, well, we can't get a hold of anybody for 6 weeks. Like, this is ridiculous. Or it doesn't seem like someone on the other end of the phone actually knows what we're doing. And so it's that little element that really makes a big difference when the sales team, support team, the success team really understands the differences, the business, the buyer, they genuinely, give a damn, for lack of a better word. That's what really makes a difference in, like, if you have apples to apples, the same shovel, but it's about the person you're buying it from at the end of the day.
Yeah. So I want you to say, instead of saying the differences in the product, I just want you to say that everybody in the company understands value and how our customers are getting value.
Yeah.
And when we can do that, it changes the game.
Yeah. When the team in place understands that, there's such an elevated atmosphere in the company. On all departments, everyone gets it. You don't have to repeat anything. It seems to click in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I would call that a culture of value.
There you go.
Nice.
I like that.
Nice. Thanks, Duane. Hey, thanks for giving me that one. But before I go to my last question, I was going to ask you this at the very beginning, but we jumped in so fast I didn't get there. So in your mind, what's the difference between a CRO and a VP of sales?
Nothing. So the main difference between a VP and a CRO, from what I've seen, is the VP of sales typically focuses on new revenue. They really focus on channel sales, referral marketing, assisting referral marketing, and they really focus on top funnel revenue. When you have the CRO, they oversee the entire revenue operation, where they have a hand in, like, expansion revenue, the upgrades, that, like, they oversee churn. So they basically manage the entire revenue process from start to end. They typically watch twice the amount of metrics that you would as a new sales leader, where you do care about throughput of the funnel, making sure that marketing and product are paying attention to what's generating the highest revenue, but then could potentially be generating the highest churn, and so they're much more involved in the lifetime of the customer rather than just, that first 2 weeks of the trial. So biggest difference there is new revenue versus all the revenue. Yeah.
It almost sounds like I would call it a COO in the following sense.
Mm-hmm.
Customer success drives CRO business, right? It drives revenue. New products drive revenue. Marketing drives revenue. And so it feels like CRO would run the entire company.
So what's interesting enough, that's where CRO came from. Was the old like COO, Chief Operating Officer, kind of turned into the CRO over the last half a decade, just from the different things it was starting to oversee. I remember working for my first CRO. His name was Ryan, and he's still a good friend of mine. And I remember asking him like what he does, and he's like, I manage all of the revenue stuff. That was his description to me. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so now when I first started seeing the CRO title, and I'm like, oh, that's just the COO, just maybe less HR.
Right.
But yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, you could imagine a few departments like HR and accounting that probably don't fit under that, but yeah, cool. Okay, we do have to get to the last question.
Yep.
What's one piece of pricing advice you'd give our listeners that you think could have a big impact on their business?
Make it easy for people to buy. Simple. It just simplify your pricing.
Oh, I thought you were going to stop there. And I was going to say, that's the fewest words you've said all day.
Just make it easy. Seriously. The easier you can make it for people to figure out the pricing on your product, the easier it is for them to buy. Simple.
Yeah, I think that's so true. The advice I often give companies, in fact, I give every company this, but I don't know that we can always implement it. And that is figure out how to create good, better, best inside market segments, because it just simplifies customers' decisions.
Yeah. No, it makes it easy for sales to happen. Like if do away with the need to create requests for proposals and like all these things. And like if you can, and plus it helps sales team figure out their commission plans, which is super helpful, but you just got to make it easier for people to spend money with you.
Nice. Duane, this has just been fabulous. Thank you so much for your time. If anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
I'm most active on LinkedIn. I post a lot of different things about sales leadership management on there. And then you can find me at themetricmanager.com, which is where I give out some free playbooks on how to manage sales teams using data.
All right. Episode 165 is all done. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this, would you please leave us a rating and a review? And finally, if you have any questions or comments about the podcast or pricing in general, feel free to email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact.